Well, I think what we're seeing now is what some people have called blowback or boomerang, you could also say. It's what comes back now from what the United States has been doing in the Middle East the last more than 20 years. Because, from 9/11 and onwards, it was Afghanistan, it was Iraq, it was Libya, and it has all the time been various types of negative attitudes and sanctions and isolation of Iran. I predicted in 2004 in my large book, Predictable Fiasco about the Iraq War, that they would not win the hearts and minds of the Iraqis. And everybody in Iraq, as far as I can understand from a distance, wants the US to leave, but they are still there. If you look at Syria, which was one gigantic regime change attempt, with a meeting in Marrakesh where the 100 countries under the US leadership went to Marrakesh in 2014 and said, we have hereby deposed Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, and replaced him with a national council of 300 people and things like that, Now they still have bases in Syria. Nobody has given them a permission to have that. West has been outraged by Russia and Iran being in Syria. They are there by invitation and were there by invitation. The US has never been invited to be there, but they have bases in Syria. The Western ally, Israel, has been occupying the Golan Heights and are regularly bombing various parts of Damascus and outside Aleppo. Generally speaking, the American foreign policy system has always been based on bases. Depending on how you define bases, the United States had more than 600 military bases around the world. In my view, this is perverse. I know from my living in Japan back in time and visiting Okinawa, how hated by the local population these base facilities are. Listen to the fact that, if you will, what people are saying now is Yankees go home. And they don't seem to get it. Now we see an upcoming war already begun in Yemen, and we see it as a consequence of the blind support to Israel in Gaza. Instead of putting down the foot and saying no longer to your friend Israel, you support it and say, please continue. The Americans have lost diplomacy. It doesn't exist anymore. You look at Ukraine, you look at Gaza, you look at other conflicts earlier, but the main tool, the toolbox is only filled with weapons. There's no diplomacy, there's no finesse, there's no elegance, there's no peace talks, there's no negotiation initiatives, there's nothing which you would expect an intelligent big power to have. It doesn't. But there's something else that I think is much more important to say, and that is the following. There are a number of major Himalayan mistakes or malfunctionings in the Western dominance system. If I go back in time, it's first of all, it's all the wars that the West have fought and lost. They cost money, they create hatred against the West, and they undermine civil society back home. Look at the infrastructure in the United States and what they are not able to do today, compared with, for instance, China's shining development. That type of, series of lost wars started in Vietnam. There's been no wars since then that the West has won. The way the United States chose to react to 9/11 was counterproductive, short-sighted, and has not solved the problem. Terrorism still exists. That's why they have bases all over the place. Long story short, all these things are signs of moral and intellectual weakness. The US can look strong because of its military, but the military has only destroyed itself. And that is a tragedy of the West. The tragedy is that the West is destroying itself. There's nobody out to destroy the West. But the West has, thanks to hubris, thanks to exceptionalism, thanks to the belief that we shall lead the world, even if it doesn't want to be led by us anymore, and the lack of creativity and innovation of the West has led to its own self-destruction. And we will have this clear polarization between the 15% who live in the West and the 85% who live in the global East and South. And that is the most important conflict formation at the moment in the world. And we need to move towards a multipolar world where we cooperate and where we allow each other to be different. And there will not be one country trying to dominate and say, you must have our system.